I was on Dr. Mike's podcast, and the comments section proved why ableism's my heart jumped. If you don't know Dr. Mike, he's one of the biggest medical YouTubers in the world. Smart, charismatic, funny, someone I'd watched for years. The idea of sitting across from him, Mike in front of me, lights on, cameras rolling, talking about blindness, life and breaking stereotypes, felt like a dream. But if I'm being honest, I was also nervous. When you live with a disability, visibility can be a double-edged sword. You want to share your story to help others understand, yet every appearance opens the door to misunderstanding. I told myself, you can handle it, Molly. You've been doing this for years. I had no idea that the hardest part wouldn't be the interview. It would be what came after it exists, or exist. The week before filming, I went into full preparation mode. I watched a few of Dr. Mike's recent episodes, studied how he asked questions, and tried to imagine what topics might come up. I wanted to be articulate but natural, someone who could talk about blindness without making it feel like a lecture. My team and I discussed travel logistics, getting Gallup's harness ready, packing his treats, making sure the studio was safe and accessible. Every trip means dozens of small adjustments sighted people never think about. Finding out where stairs are, how far the washroom is, what the lighting feels like, even the floor texture so Gallup knows when to stop. Still, I was excited. I wanted to show that being blind doesn't limit you. It just changes how you do things. When I arrived, the energy in the studio buzzed. People moved quickly, cameras adjusted, someone offered me water. Dr. Mike came over, warm handshake, friendly voice. Molly, thank you for coming. I'm such a fan of your channel. That alone eased my nerves. We talked briefly about our channels. Mine focused on blindness and empowerment, his on medicine and healthy living. He told me he wanted to explore what health looks like from my perspective. Mental, physical, emotional. It felt respectful. It felt collaborative. I remember thinking, this is going to be good. Once the microphones were on, I forgot about the cameras. We talked about everything, how I lost my vision, what independence means when you can't see, how Gallup changed my life, the funny mishaps that happen when you travel blind. Dr. Mike asked thoughtful questions. He laughed when I shared stories about confusing shampoo bottles or walking confidently into the wrong Uber. The conversation felt honest, two humans connecting. For an hour, I felt seen, not as a blind woman, but as a whole person. When we wrapped, the crew applauded lightly, Gallup wagged his tail, and I left feeling proud. Little did I know that the comment section would soon remind me just how far we still have to go. The episode dropped a few days later. I was on my couch, blanket around me, phone buzzing with notifications. My inbox filled with messages. Molly, you were amazing. I loved your positivity, I smiled. Then I made the mistake we all make. I opened the comments. At first, it was the usual YouTube mix. Supportive notes, random questions, few light jokes. But as I scrolled deeper, the tone changed. She's so inspiring. I can't imagine living like that. I've been online for years. Negative comments are part of the job, but this felt different because the podcast wasn't about drama or controversy. It was about education, empathy, connection. Yet people still managed to turn it into a debate about my abilities, my appearance, my worth. That's the insidious thing about ableism. It often hides behind polite words. People say, I didn't mean it that way, but intent doesn't erase impact. I thought about the young blind person who might read those same comments, someone still learning to love themselves, to feel confident walking into a room. What would they feel? Why does she even need a YouTube channel? She can't see the camera. I bet she's exaggerating. She doesn't look blind. My chest tightened. The words blurred together, a wall of ignorance, pity and disbelief. Some weren't even hateful. They were simply dismissive. As if my existence was a curiosity, a spectacle to debate. I closed my phone. For a moment, I just sat there in silence, Gallup's head resting on my knee. People often think ableism means obvious cruelty, someone mocking a disabled person or denying access. But sometimes it's subtle. It hides behind compliments like, "You're so brave," or questions like, "How do you put on makeup?" When what they really mean is, I don't believe you can live fully. Reading those comments felt like a mirror reflecting society's quiet disbelief, the assumption that disability automatically equals tragedy. And what hurt most wasn't the strangers. It was knowing that many of them probably saw themselves as kind people, probably the same sting I felt that night. I debated for hours whether to speak up. Should I ignore it? Should I make a statement? Should I just move on? But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Silence helps no one. So I opened my notes app and started typing. Not a rant, but a reflection, something honest. And when I appeared on Dr. Mike's podcast, I hoped people would learn about blindness and accessibility. What I didn't expect was that the comment section would remind me why these conversations are still so important. Ableism isn't just about cruelty, it's about the assumptions that shape how you see us. I hit post within hours, thousands of comments poured in, from blind viewers, wheelchair users, chronically ill people, even parents of disabled kids. Thank you for saying this. I feel this every day. People don't realise how hurtful innocent comments can be. That's when I realised this story wasn't about me versus the trolls. It was about all of us. Anyone who's ever been reduced to their diagnosis or underestimated because of difference. People often think ableism means calling someone names or denying a wheelchair ramp. That's the surface level. But the deeper truth, ableism is the invisible system that teaches the world that disabled lives are less valuable, less capable, or less interesting. It's the way a stranger grabs my arm without asking, because they assume I'm lost. It's the airline employee who speaks to my sighted friend instead of me. It's the person who whispers, "You're so inspiring," as if existing in a disabled body automatically makes me a motivational poster. Ableism isn't always hatred. It's often ignorance wrapped in politeness, and that's what the comment section revealed. Not a sea of villains, but a sea of people who've never questioned the biases they've absorbed. Scrolling through those comments, I realised how subtle the patterns are. Is she so brave for going on a podcast? That sounds kind, right? But imagine hearing that every single day, for doing what others do without applause. Over time, it stops feeling like encouragement and starts feeling like limitation. Or this one, she doesn't look blind. What does blindness look like? A dark pair of glasses? A white cane? Blindness is a spectrum, yet people cling to stereotypes because it's easier than learning nuance. And the classic .I could never live like that. It's not about you. It's about how little you understand that disabled people do live like this. Joyfully, fully, and with agency, often hides under a curiosity. People ask invasive questions in the name of education. Can you really do your own makeup? Do blind people date? Who takes care of you? Well, they'd never ask those things to a sighted person, but the internet gives them permission, as if my blindness cancels my boundaries. When you post anything about disability, suddenly your body becomes public property. Every gesture is analysed, every sentence becomes proof or contradiction. If I smile too much, I'm faking positivity. If I speak firmly, I'm angry. It's exhausting, yet this is why I keep creating. Because the only way to shift perception is to stay visible. Growing up, the only blind characters I saw on screen were tragic, magical, or helpless. They existed to teach the sighted hero a lesson, never to live their own adventure. So when people saw me laughing with Dr. Mike, confident and opinionated, it didn't fit the script they'd been taught. Some couldn't process it. Their brains short-circuited. Wait, she's blind and confident. Representation matters because it rewires expectation. The more people see disabled creators living ordinary, extraordinary lives, the less room there is for ignorance. Many comments tried to defend the ableism by saying, we didn't mean it that way. But intent doesn't erase impact. If you accidentally step on someone's foot, the pain is still real, even if you apologize. The same applies online. When you reduce someone to inspiration or pity, you take away their complexity. I've learned that education isn't about shaming people. It's about inviting them to notice what they've never questioned. The moment you see ableism, you can choose to unlearn it. After the video aired, I spent a few nights replaying everything in my head. Not the conversation with Dr. Mike, but the flood of reaction. I reminded myself that for every ignorant comment, there were 100 supportive ones. Still, I couldn't shake the thought. If this happens to me, with a platform and confidence, what happens to people who don't have a voice? That's when my frustration turned into purpose. This wasn't about defending myself. It was about defending the next generation of blind kids reading those threads, choosing education over anger. It would have been easy to make a fiery response video, calling out every offensive remark. But outrage burns fast. Education lasts longer. So I decided to create something different. A conversation about why ableism keeps resurfacing. How fear, unfamiliarity, and lack of representation feed it. The goal wasn't revenge, it was awareness. To show people that ableism doesn't disappear with good manners. It disappears when empathy becomes instinct a week later. I received an email from a viewer who had left one of those ignorant comments. He wrote, "I never realized what I said was ableist until I watched your follow-up. I'm sorry." I showed it to my kids. We talked about it. That message reminded me why I keep sharing these uncomfortable stories. Change doesn't happen in viral outrage. It happens in quiet realizations. For every person who still doesn't get it, there's another who starts to see differently. And that's enough reason to keep speaking. Ableism didn't appear overnight. It's woven into centuries of how society defines a normal. For most of history, disability was treated as something to fix, hide, or fear. People with disabilities were kept out of schools, jobs, and even public spaces. When medicine advanced, the conversation shifted from hiding disabled people to curing them. Yet the message stayed the same. You're broken until you're fixed. So when someone online questions how a blind woman can travel alone or appear on a podcast, they're echoing those old systems. It's not new hate, it's inherited ignorance. Each generation repeats what the last one left unexamined. Education can break that cycle, but only if we name it. Ableism is not a personal flaw. It's a cultural tradition disguised as concern. Hollywood still loves two disability tropes, the tragic victim and the superhuman inspiration. Movies show blind characters either crying in darkness or magically sensing colours. Rarely do we see them living regular lives, paying bills, laughing at bad jokes, ordering coffee without drama. Those stories teach audiences that disability equals either suffering or superpower. So when someone like Molly appears online being funny, fashionable, and fiercely independent, it scrambles those scripts. Viewers don't know which box to put her in, so they project confusion, pity, or skepticism. That's why representation matters, not to glorify, but to normalize. Music, media, and micro-ableism, even pop songs can carry ableism without realizing it. Lines like "I was blind, but now I see" use disability as a metaphor for ignorance, turning real conditions into symbols for brokenness. When listeners hear that language everywhere, from lyrics to news headlines, it seeps into their thinking. Blindness becomes shorthand for a cluelessness. Lameness becomes a boring. And suddenly, entire identities are reduced to insults. Changing that doesn't require censorship, it requires awareness. Artists can be powerful allies when they rethink the words they use. Representation starts with reflection. The influence of online culture, social media, magnifies everything. The same algorithms that spread dance trends also spread stereotypes. When a disabled creator posts a video, the first wave of comments often divides people into two camps. Those who gush with pity or praise, "You're so brave." Those who doubt the reality, "You can't really be blind if you use a phone." Both responses miss the point. The internet loves extremes but struggles with nuance. True allyship lives in the middle, in the quiet act of listening without assuming. Education gap: most schools still teach disability history as a footnote, if at all. Students learn about civil rights, gender equality, and racial justice, but not about accessibility laws or the disability rights movement. That gap leaves people unequipped to understand what ableism looks like today. They grow up thinking ramps and braille menus solved everything, never realizing that attitudes lag decades behind architecture. Every YouTube video, podcast, or TikTok clip sparks discussion, helps fill that void. Awareness online becomes education offline. The cost of representation being visible while disabled is rewarding, but it's also emotionally expensive. Every story shared publicly invites judgment. For Molly, that means balancing openness with self-care. Not every detail of blindness belongs on the internet, but audiences often demand total transparency as proof. You can advocate for visibility without sacrificing boundaries. Allies who get it right, real allies, don't speak for disabled people. They listen to them. They amplify rather than translate, credit rather than copy. When sighted creators collaborate with blind influencers respectfully, by asking how to make content accessible or sharing editing tasks equally, it models inclusion that audiences notice. Partnerships like those turn awareness into action. They show that accessibility isn't charity, it's creativity. The hope ahead, despite the negativity in those comment sections, progress is undeniable. 10 years ago, platforms like YouTube barely had captions. Now, automatic transcription, audio description, and alt text are becoming standard. That's not a trend, it's a transformation. Each time a viewer rethinks a comment before posting, each time a teacher adds a disabled creator to a media studies class, we move a little closer to a culture where difference isn't doubted. It's respected. Ableism survives in silence, but awareness spreads through conversation. And this conversation is just beginning. The hope ahead, despite the negativity in those comment sections, progress is undeniable. 10 years ago, platforms like YouTube barely had captions. Now, automatic transcription, audio description, and alt text are becoming standard. That's not a trend. It's a transformation. Each time a viewer rethinks a comment before posting, each time a teacher adds a disabled creator to a media studies class, we move a little closer to a culture where difference isn't doubted. It's respected. Ableism survives in silence, but awareness spreads through conversation. And this conversation is just beginning.